The silence was the worst part. Lara stood at the main window of the research vessel Starseeker, her crystalline fingers touching the cold surface as she watched the endless stars drift by. The ship's emergency lights cast a dim red glow across her translucent skin, making the crystalline patterns beneath shimmer like rubies. 3 months had passed since the last of her crew, her family, had died. The plague had taken them quickly, turning their crystalline bodies cloudy before they shattered into dust. Lyra had watched, helpless, as 23 of her people, the last research team of their kind, crumbled away. She walked through the empty corridors, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The ship's systems hummed weakly around her, a constant reminder that time was running out. In the medical bay, she stopped before the wall of memorial crystals, each one containing the last light essence of her fallen crew members. Her mother's crystal glowed the brightest, still pulsing with the fierce determination that had characterized her life. "I don't know what to do anymore, Mother," Lyra whispered, her voice rough from disuse. "The power systems are failing. The recyclers can barely keep up. I've tried everything you taught me." The ship's computer chimed softly, drawing her attention to yet another system failure. The life support was now operating at 43% capacity, down another 2 points from yesterday. At this rate, she had maybe 2 weeks before the ship's crystal core would fail completely. Lyra moved to the bridge, settling into the captain's chair that had once belonged to her father. The control panels flickered weakly, most of their crystals dulled with age and lack of maintenance. Their species had always relied on the natural regeneration of their crystal technology, but without a full crew to channel their energy into the ship's systems, everything was slowly dying. She pulled up the star charts again, though she had memorized them weeks ago. The nearest outpost was too far. She would never make it with the engines in their current state. The trading routes were empty these days, as news of the plague had spread. No one wanted to risk contact with their ships, even though Lyra knew her unique genetic structure, a mutation that had saved her life, meant she couldn't spread the disease. A warning light flashed on the console. The starboard engine was starting to crystallize, its matrix breaking down without proper energy input. Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her solitude press down on her shoulders. She was the last one. The last of her kind in this sector of space, maybe even the last one in the galaxy. The thought made her chest ache with a pain that had nothing to do with physical wounds. The decision she had been avoiding for weeks now stood before her, unavoidable as a black hole's pull. Opening the emergency protocols, Lyra began the process of activating the distress beacon. Her fingers hesitated over the final command. "Forgive me," she whispered to the empty bridge. Activating an emergency beacon meant revealing their location to everyone, including those who might wish to study rather than help her. Her people's crystal technology was highly sought after, and a living specimen of her species would be priceless to the wrong kind of people. But she had no choice. The ship shuddered around her, another system failing somewhere in its vast halls. Without help, both she and the ship would become another piece of space debris, their story lost forever in the void. Lyra pressed the final command. The beacon sprang to life, its crystal core pulsing with a bright, steady light as it sent out its call across the stars. The message was simple, broadcast in the common trade language. Research vessel Starseeker. Critical systems failure. 1 survivor aboard. Request immediate assistance. Now all she could do was wait and hope. Hope that whoever answered her call would see her as a person in need, not a prize to be claimed. Hope that somewhere in this vast, cold universe, there was still kindness to be found. As the beacon pulsed steadily beside her, Lyra returned to her vigil by the window, watching the stars and waiting for either salvation or doom to arrive. Tom Walker stood at the helm of the salvage ship Second Chance, his weathered hands resting on the control panel as he studied the unusual signal on his screen. 20 years of space salvage work had taught him to be cautious, but something about this distress beacon was different. "Captain, that's definitely a Crystal Tech signature," said Mark, his chief engineer, peering at the readings. Could be one of those ships from the Crystalline Empire. You know, the ones that got hit by that plague last year. Tom nodded slowly, running his fingers through his graying beard. The news about the plague had spread fast through the trading routes. Most ships now avoided that whole sector of space, afraid of contamination. But the signal pattern was clear. Someone was still alive out there. What do the other ships in the area say? Tom asked, turning to Lisa at the communication station. That's the weird thing, Captain, Lisa replied, adjusting her headset. I'm picking up at least 3 other ships that received the signal. They all logged it and just moved on. One of them even marked it as potentially hazardous in the emergency broadcast system. Tom frowned. The screen showed the stranded ship's power readings dropping steadily. Whoever was aboard probably didn't have much time left. Pull up the quarantine reports, he ordered. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. The main screen filled with medical data. Tom wasn't a scientist, but he learned to read these reports after the plague started. The information was clear. The crystalline species biology was so different from carbon-based life forms that cross-contamination was impossible. The plague that killed them couldn't hurt humans, and human diseases couldn't affect them. Captain, Mark said hesitantly, the salvage rights alone on a Crystal Tech ship would set us up for life. But if there's a survivor, he left the sentence hanging. Tom turned to face his crew of 5. They were all watching him, waiting for his decision. He knew what they were thinking. Crystal technology was worth a fortune. Most salvage crews would see this as the opportunity of a lifetime. We're not salvagers today, Tom said firmly. We're rescue workers. Lisa, send a response to that beacon. Let them know we're coming. Mark, get the emergency systems ready. We don't know what kind of shape that ship is in. What about the contamination warnings from the other ships? Lisa asked. Tom shook his head. Those ships chose to listen to their fear instead of their conscience. We're better than that. Someone needs help, and we're going to provide it. That's what humans do. The crew moved into action, preparing for rescue operations. Tom watched as the distance to the stranded vessel slowly decreased on his navigation screen. He thought about all the ships that had picked up this same signal and chosen to ignore it. Fear made people do terrible things sometimes. Coming up on visual range, announced Pete from the navigation station, putting it on the main screen now. The image that appeared made them all pause. The crystal ship was beautiful, even in its dying state. Its transparent hull caught the light of nearby stars, breaking it into rainbow patterns. But the beauty couldn't hide the signs of distress. Dark patches where systems had failed, and the weak pulsing of its core showed it was running on emergency power. Life signs? Tom asked. Just one, Lisa confirmed. Very faint, but steady. Definitely crystalline biology. Tom straightened his uniform jacket, a habit from his military days. All right, people, let's do this by the book. We're about to make first contact with possibly the last survivor of a species. Let's show them what humanity is really made of. As they carefully maneuvered closer to the stricken vessel, Tom silently promised the lone survivor that help had finally arrived. Sometimes being human meant ignoring profit, ignoring fear, and simply doing what was right. Lyra watched through the viewing window as the human ship connected to her airlock. Unlike the sleek crystal design of her vessel, their ship was built of metal and composite materials, its hull marked with patches and repairs. The name Second Chance was painted in bold letters across its side. Her heart raced as the airlock cycled. Other ships had come before, but they'd all turned away after scanning her vessel. This was the first time anyone had actually tried to dock. The crystal patterns under her skin flickered with anxiety, casting shifting shadows on the walls. The inner airlock door slid open with a hiss. Lyra stepped back, unsure what to expect. A tall human with gray in his beard stepped through first, followed by a woman in a medical uniform. Neither wore protective suits, which surprised Lyra. Every other species had approached her ship in full containment gear. "Hello there," the man said, his voice gentle. I'm Captain Tom Walker of the Second Chance. We got your distress signal. He moved slowly, hands visible, like someone approaching a frightened animal. Are you hurt? Lyra shook her head, her crystalline form catching the light. No, I am functioning normally, but my ship is dying. Her voice cracked from disuse. Why aren't you wearing protection? The others, they all feared contamination. Tom smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. We read the medical reports. Your biology is crystalline-based, completely different from ours. There's no risk of cross-contamination. Besides, it's hard to help someone when you're wrapped up like a hazmat mummy. The human doctor, Lisa, as she introduced herself, stepped forward with a medical scanner. May I just want to make sure you're okay? Lyra nodded, watching in fascination as the woman worked. No one had gotten this close to her in months. The scanner hummed, and Lisa smiled at the readings. Perfect health, Lisa announced, though your body temperature is a bit low by your species standards. Tom frowned at this information. You must be freezing. The ship's environmental controls are failing, aren't they? Without waiting for an answer, he shrugged off his jacket and held it out to her. Here, it's not much, but it'll help until we get you somewhere warmer. Lyra stared at the offered jacket, then at Tom's face. The simple kindness of the gesture made her throat tight. You're really here to help, not to salvage. Of course we're here to help, Tom said firmly. Though I have to admit, we'll probably need to salvage some parts of your ship. It's too damaged to save completely. But you're the priority here. More of the human crew had entered now, each introducing themselves with warm smiles. Mark, the engineer, was already examining the failing systems with professional interest. Pete, the navigator, was helping Lisa set up portable heating units around the cold bridge. I don't understand, Lyra said, clutching Tom's jacket around her shoulders. 3 other ships came. They scanned us and left. They said it wasn't worth the risk. Tom's face darkened. Then they forgot what it means to be civilized. Look, where I come from, Earth, we have a saying. No one gets left behind. It doesn't matter if you're human or not. If someone needs help, and we can provide it, we do. The crystal patterns beneath Lyra's skin brightened with hope for the first time in months. What will happen to me now? First, Tom said, pulling out a thermal container from his pack, you're going to try hot chocolate. It's a human tradition for people who've had a rough time. Then we'll work on transferring your crew's memorial crystals and any important data to our ship. After that, he smiled warmly. Well, we'll figure it out together. Lyra took the offered drink with trembling hands, the warm container a stark contrast to the cold ship around her. As she listened to the humans working, their voices filling the empty corridors with life again, she realized that perhaps the universe wasn't as dark and empty as she had feared. 2 days had passed since Lyra boarded the Second Chance. She sat in the ship's common room, watching the crew during their meal break. The humans had given her a private cabin, but she found herself drawn to their company after months of isolation. You're staring again, Tom said kindly, sliding into the seat across from her. He pushed a mug of hot chocolate toward her. It had quickly become her favorite human drink. Penny for your thoughts. Lyra's crystal patterns flickered in confusion. A penny. Sorry, human saying. Means I'm asking what you're thinking about, Tom explained, sipping his coffee. I'm trying to understand humans, Lyra admitted. Your engineer Mark spent 6 hours saving data from my ship's crystal core yesterday. Lisa checks on my health twice a day. Pete taught me human card games. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Why do you all care so much? Tom leaned back in his chair, considering her question. Did you know humans almost went extinct 3 times in our history? When Lyra shook her head, he continued. Disease, war, climate disasters. We faced them all. Each time, it wasn't our technology that saved us. It was our ability to care for each other, to help strangers, to rebuild together. The common room's door opened, and Mark rushed in, his face excited. Captain. Lyra, the data recovery worked. We saved most of the research files from the crystal core. Lyra's form brightened instantly. My mother's work. The plague research. All of it, Mark confirmed. It's encrypted in crystal format, but we can transfer it whenever you're ready. Tom watched as Lyra's crystalline features shifted with joy. The crew had quickly learned to read her emotional states through the changing patterns under her translucent skin. Right now, she was practically glowing. That research could help prevent another plague. Lyra said softly, "My mother died trying to finish it." She looked at Tom. "Your crew could have stripped my ship for parts. The crystal technology alone would make you rich. Instead, you saved our research." "We're not saints," Tom admitted. "We'll salvage what we can from your ship's hull. No sense letting good materials go to waste. But knowledge, lives, those are always worth more than profit." Lisa entered the common room, carrying her medical tablet. "Speaking of lives, I've been studying your biological readings. Lyra, your crystal matrix is actually starting to strengthen now that you're getting proper rest and staying warm. Humans might not understand crystal biology completely, but we can still help you heal." Lyra touched the memorial crystal she wore around her neck, all that remained of her mother. "On my world, we had a saying. A crystal alone will crack, but many together grow strong. I never truly understood it until now." "That's not so different from human sayings," Tom noted. "We say strength in numbers, or it takes a village." He grinned. "Though I have to admit, your version sounds more poetic." The ship's intercom crackled. "Captain," Pete's voice called from the bridge. "We're approaching the New Terra colony. They're requesting our identification and purpose." Tom stood up. "Well, time to face the bureaucrats." "Don't worry, Lyra. We'll handle the paperwork. You're under our protection now." "What if they don't want me there?" Lyra asked, her earlier confidence wavering. "Then we'll find somewhere else," Tom said firmly. "Humanity has a long history of taking in refugees. Besides this crew, we've kind of adopted you already. That's another human trait. We're really bad at letting go of family, even the ones we choose ourselves." For the first time since losing her people, Lyra felt truly safe. These humans, with their strange sayings and their endless cups of hot chocolate, had given her something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope for the future. New Terra's spaceport loomed ahead, its crystal and metal towers gleaming in the morning sunlight. Lyra stood on the Second Chance's observation deck, her crystalline form reflecting the colors of the approaching planet. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. "Nervous?" Tom asked, joining her at the window. He'd changed into his formal uniform for their landing, though his beard was still slightly scruffy. "The last time I was on a planet, I was saying goodbye to my home world," Lyra said quietly. "That was 2 years ago, before we started our research mission." The ship's comm system crackled. "Captain," Lisa called from the medical bay. "The colony's health department is requesting Lyra's biological data again. 3rd time in an hour." Tom sighed. "Send it. Again. With a note reminding them that we've already proven there's no contamination risk." He turned to Lyra. "Sorry about this. Bureaucrats are the same everywhere. They love their paperwork." The landing was smooth, but the welcome was anything but. A group of official-looking humans waited in the docking bay, their faces serious. Lyra recognized their types from her own world: politicians, scientists, and security personnel. Captain Walker, a tall woman in a gray suit, stepped forward. "I'm Administrator Helen Wells. We need to discuss your passenger." "My crew member," Tom corrected firmly. "Lyra is under my ship's protection." The administrator's eyes narrowed. "A survivor of the Crystal Empire, carrying their advanced biotechnology. Do you understand what this means?" "It means," Tom said, his voice hard, "that someone who lost everything deserves a chance to build a new life. Or did we forget our own history of helping refugees?" A shorter man in a lab coat pushed forward eagerly. The crystalline technology alone could advance our research by decades. We must insist on full access to. No, Tom cut him off. Lyra isn't a research subject. She's a person. Any sharing of technology or knowledge will be her choice, not yours. Lyra watched this exchange, her crystal pattern swirling with anxiety. But then she felt a warm hand on her shoulder. Lisa had stepped up beside her. Mark and Pete moved closer too, flanking her protectively. The message was clear. The crew stood with her. Actually, Lyra spoke up, her voice stronger than she felt. I want to share my people's knowledge. The officials looked at her with surprise. But I will do it as a teacher, not a test subject. My mother was working on medical applications of crystal technology when she died. I want to continue her work to help others. Administrator Wells studied her for a long moment. You understand we'll need guarantees, agreements. And you understand, Tom interrupted, that any agreements will be fair. Lyra keeps her freedom, her rights, and the right to say no. Or do I need to contact the Refugee Protection Committee? The administrator's expression softened slightly. Perhaps we can discuss this somewhere more comfortable. We have prepared quarters for you, Miss Lyra. As they walked through the spaceport, Lyra noticed something interesting. Other humans were stopping to watch. But unlike the officials, they showed curiosity and sympathy in their faces. A small child waved at her, fascinated by her crystalline appearance. An elderly couple smiled warmly. See, Tom whispered. Regular humans are usually better than their governments. Give them time. They'll accept you. In the guest quarters, which were far more luxurious than Lyra expected, Tom helped her set up her mother's memorial crystal in a place of honor. What happens now? Lyra asked. Now, Tom smiled. You start your new life, and we'll be here to help. The second chance makes regular stops at New Terra. Plus, he winked, someone needs to keep bringing you hot chocolate. For the first time since landing, Lyra's crystal patterns glowed with genuine happiness. She had lost one home, but perhaps, with these humans' help, she could build another. 3 months into her stay on New Terra, Lyra stood before a class of wide-eyed medical students. Her crystal patterns glowed softly as she guided them through the basics of crystalline biology. The lecture hall, originally designed for 50 students, now held over 200 people. Doctors, researchers, and curious citizens who had heard about the crystal teacher. And this is how our healing matrix works, she explained, projecting a hologram from her handheld crystal. The same principles could be adapted to work with human medical technology. A young student raised her hand. But aren't you worried about sharing your people's secrets? Lyra smiled, remembering Tom asking her the same question. Knowledge that can save lives should never be a secret, she answered. That's something I learned from humans. After class, as she gathered her teaching crystals, she noticed a commotion outside the lecture hall. A small group of protesters had gathered, holding signs about alien influence and protecting human purity. Her heart sank, but before she could worry too much, she heard a familiar voice. Having trouble with the welcoming committee? Tom asked, stepping into the room. The second chance had just returned from a salvage run, and he still wore his work clothes. Some humans are afraid of change, Lyra said, watching the protesters through the window. I understand. My people were the same way before. Tom nodded. Before the plague. But look again. Lyra looked. This time, she noticed something else. A much larger group of humans had formed a protective line between the protesters and the building. Many were her students. Others were patients who had benefited from the new crystal hybrid medical treatments she had helped develop. They held signs too. Knowledge knows no species, and New Terra welcomes all. That's the real humanity, Tom said proudly. For every person who fears the unknown, there are 10 who want to learn from it. They walked together through a side exit, where Lisa was waiting with their transport. The medical officer had taken a permanent position at the colony's hospital, working with Lyra to integrate crystal technology into human medicine. You should see the latest test results, Lisa said excitedly as they drove. The crystal-enhanced healing chambers are showing a 60% improvement in recovery times. Even the skeptics can't argue with those numbers. They arrived at Lyra's apartment, a beautiful space overlooking the colony's crystal gardens. The gardens had been a gift from the Colony Council, designed to make her feel more at home. But what really made it home were the pictures on her walls. Group photos with the Second Chances crew, snapshots of her first day teaching, images of successful patients. "Oh, I almost forgot," Tom said, pulling a package from his bag. "We found something during our last salvage run. The ship's markings. I think it might have been from your world." Lyra opened the package carefully. Inside was a data crystal, its structure familiar and ancient. Her patterns flickered with emotion as she read its contents. "It's a cultural archive," she whispered. "Music, art, stories. I thought all of these were lost." "Well," Tom grinned, "now you have more to teach us. Humanity's not just interested in your technology, you know. We want to learn everything. Your culture, your history, your art. That's who we are." Lyra touched the crystal gently. "When I first came here, I thought I was the last one carrying my people's legacy. But now," she gestured to the busy colony outside her window, where humans and a growing number of other alien species went about their daily lives together. "Now I see that legacy living on in new ways, through everyone who learns and shares and grows." Tom put a hand on her shoulder. "That's the thing about humans. We're really good at adopting other cultures' best parts while keeping their spirit alive. It's how we grow." He smiled. "And speaking of human culture, I believe you promised to try pizza today." 1 year had passed since Lyra first arrived on New Terra. She stood in the colony's new Crystal Medical Center, watching as doctors used crystal-enhanced equipment to treat patients. The building itself was a beautiful blend of human and crystalline architecture, its walls gleaming with embedded healing matrices. "Hard to believe this all started with a distress signal," Tom said, joining her at the observation window. He visited whenever the Second Chance returned to port, always bringing her favorite hot chocolate. "Sometimes I wonder if my mother would recognize her research," Lyra mused, her crystal patterns shifting with gentle blue lights. "We've taken it so far beyond what she imagined." A young human girl walked past them, her broken arm healing in a crystal cast that glowed softly. She waved at Lyra with her good arm, smiling brightly. These new medical treatments had cut healing times in half, and they worked on all species, a discovery that had drawn more alien visitors to New Terra. "Your mother would be proud," Tom assured her. "Not just of the medical advances, but of you. You've built something amazing here." They walked through the hospital corridors, passing rooms where human and alien doctors worked together, learning from each other. In one room, Lisa was teaching a group of medical students how to calibrate crystal healing chambers. In another, aliens from 3 different species waited patiently for treatment. "Did you hear about the vote?" Lyra asked as they reached her office. The space was filled with both human and crystal technology, along with pictures of her growing family, the crew of the Second Chance, her students, and her patients. Tom grinned. "That the Colony Council unanimously approved permanent residency rights for all crystalline survivors." "Yeah, I heard. Though you're still the only one we found. But we might not be alone," Lyra said excitedly, pulling up a star chart on her crystal display. "Look at these signals we detected. They're very faint, but they match our old colony patterns. There might be other survivors out there, in distant sectors." "Already talked to the crew," Tom said. "The Second Chance is ready whenever you want to go looking. We've come a long way from that first rescue mission." Lyra touched the memorial crystal she still wore, her mother's last light. "When I was alone on that dying ship, I thought I was the last one, that my people's legacy would die with me." She gestured to the busy hospital around them. "Now look, our knowledge lives on, helping people. Our art and music are taught in schools. Our stories are shared in the colony's library." A nurse knocked on the door, holding a tablet. "Dr. Lyra." The new crystal hybrid vaccines are ready for testing. And there's a group of alien medical students arriving next week who want to learn about crystalline healing techniques. Thank you, Emma, Lyra said. I'll review the data right away. After the nurse left, Tom chuckled. Dr. Lyra. Still getting used to that title. Well, technically I'm a different kind of doctor than you humans have, Lyra said. But the principles are the same. Helping others, sharing knowledge, working together to solve problems. Tom nodded toward the window, where the setting sun painted New Terra's skyline in beautiful colors. That's the real legacy you've built here. Not just the technology or the medical advances, but showing everyone that we're stronger when we work together. That's the most human thing of all. Lyra's crystal patterns glowed warmly. I'm not sure if I'm becoming more human, or if humans are becoming more like my people. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe that's the point, Tom said softly. In the end, we're all just people trying to make the universe a better place. He pulled out 2 cups of hot chocolate from his bag. Now shall we toast to another year of proving that compassion knows no species. As they watched the sun set over their shared home, Lyra realized that while she might have lost her first family, she had found something just as precious. A future where hope knew no boundaries, and where being human meant more than just biology. It meant having the courage to care, the wisdom to learn, and the strength to help others, no matter who or what they were.